Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Hello, and welcome to today's virtual Commonwealth Club program. My name is Julie Latta, Program Manager with Applied Materials. Through Generation Girl, the Applied Materials Foundation is dedicated to inspiring girls to pursue their dreams. One of the best ways to encourage the next generation of diverse female leaders is to introduce them to inspirational women. And so we are thrilled to be a part of today's special program with Linda Yvette Chavez, co-creator, co-showrunner, and executive producer of the Netflix hit series, Hentified. Through her creative ventures, Linda has made it her mission to tell authentic Latinx stories and increase representation, not just in actors, but in narratives and settings. The bold success of these efforts has won her critical acclaim and praise from audiences and writers' rooms alike. We are eager to hear from one of the top Latinas changing the game of representation in television about breaking the bias and inspiring future generations. Moderating our conversation is Michelle Meow, producer and host of The Michelle Meow Show and member of the Commonwealth Club's Board of Governors. Please join me in welcoming Linda and Michelle.
Thank you so much, Julie. I am so thrilled to be moderating this conversation with Linda. Linda, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm so much better that I'm sitting here with you now.
Yeah. I want to first say thank you so much for Hentified. I mean, especially for us in the BIPOC community, but also the first generation immigrant children. It was so important. So I just want to say thank you before we begin our conversation.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
I thought we could start off with something that I think you're very familiar with, and that is trauma bonding. I know that you mentioned trauma bonding before. It was something that you used to do with Marcus, who is your co-showrunner and also director of Hentified, co-creator of Hentified. So I'm going to leave it at that. Let's trauma bond.
All right. You want me to talk about trauma bonding, or you and I are going to trauma bond shortly?
I think we should trauma bond. There's so much going on right now that's traumatizing. And I just think that let's create that space for a little bit of trauma bonding.
I feel you. I feel that. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I today, for example, had a couple people reach out and just say, I'm not okay. There's a lot going on, especially young folks, young people of color. A lot of people who are experiencing just a lot of pressure and stress. And so I wanted to take it there and maybe offer space for you to exchange maybe what you're hearing, what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very tough time for so many people. And it's kind of almost feels, the right word's not silly or ridiculous, but a little odd to say, because we've been saying that for so long now. Like this feeling of like things don't feel all right, or we get these highs and then we have to come back down to these lows that are not expected sometimes. And I think recently for us, for me in particular, another, the shooting that happened in Uvalde was really traumatic for not only obviously the victims, but so many of us who have to, for all of us, right? But also for me in particular, I feel like seeing people who look like me, having to go through something like that is very difficult to comprehend and process. And that's hard to take in and process when you're trying to be creative. And I think so many of us are trying to continue to work and be in the orbit of our lives and continue to move forward. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of space to process a lot of the trauma and the grief that we're experiencing. And for me, that's sad. Like, I wish there was more opportunity in spaces like this for people to come in and really talk about what has been so difficult for them, and also talk about the places where they're finding joy and support and love, and how can we come together to find light even in the midst of the darkness.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that that's the case in the entire country. really focused on what's happening in Uvalde. And at the same time, it made me think about a potential scene in Hentified, focused in on the lived experiences of the Latinx community. And I kind of went into this thing where I was like, I really wish that, the media told the stories of these families the right way. I don't know if you have a feeling about that. And what I mean by that is like talking about them for who they truly are.
Yeah, I mean, like really diving into who these people are. I mean, listen, I think there's some media that maybe is not focusing in on who these people are. And then I have found that there have been some who are kind of showing the lives of people. And in particular, like there's the young mother who went in to save her children in spite of being handcuffed and like dragged into the space, or dragged from going in to get her child. Like I just recently saw an interview with her and was able to see some of her story and who she is. But I think media, like in terms of like television, seeing those real stories, who they are in 3-dimensional ways, that is something that I think we're still in process, and something that we try to do with Hentified is being able to show our communities in full form and in 3D, right? Like who are we in so many different ways. And I think that is so necessary in order to really understand the breadth of who we are in this country. And that then leads to other things, right? Like rights and being respected and not having to wait an hour plus for police to go and save your children. Because I think that unconscious bias that happens because you don't know someone or because they're different or because they feel foreign to you, then leads to unconscious actions that are a result of that are not always positive. So yeah, that's what that makes me think of.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about television. And, Julie had mentioned it in the intro, and you've been successful in inserting, these lived experiences as well as authentic representation in something like television. It's been a wild ride for you between Hentified and, before Hentified, never selling a script in Hollywood. And then all of a sudden it's this big Netflix, show. And after 2 seasons, it gets canceled. But then you also signed a deal with 20th Century Television and continuing to write and to script and work with some of the best. Right? Like Eva Longoria and America Ferrera.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about what you've been up to.
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, it's been almost like 7 years now since Hentified came into my life, which is really crazy to say. I was just doing a talk last night with these young Latina directors, and, they were introing me and they're like, she's did all these things in 2 years. And I was like, no, actually, these are all things that have been happening and in process for quite a bit of time. And now so many of them are out in the world and coming into fruition. And it's been such a wild ride in so many ways, but also so fulfilling to like make an impact through my work. Hentified, even though it was 2 seasons, it was like the little show that could, it's the little show that like really hit people in the heart, especially those who felt the most represented by the show. Like the amount of people who have sent us messages or talked to us about what the show meant to them is like, there's millions of people. And like that impact for me was the dream that I've had most of my life as a writer. And so to be here in this moment where I get to do that, and now Flaming Hot actually has been having these feedback screenings in recent months, and more and more people are watching them, and the feedback has been phenomenal. And it's a similar thing, like that feeling of like, oh, the thing I worked so hard to create and put into the world, where people get to feel seen and loved and celebrated, and their hurts, their pains, and their joys together get to be depicted in 3-dimensional ways. Like every time I can do that, I'm just like over the moon. And I think this past year especially has been such a beautiful time. And honestly, at the same time as beautiful, it was also hard. It's hard to go from nothing to so much. And not to say that there was nothing. I've been working really hard for a long time. It just looks like the last 6 years have been kind of where I've reached the pinnacle of my dream, right? But it's also hard to be there. It's also hard to level up, as they say, and to wonder about like, how are things going to change in your life? How are relationships going to change? How will you be perceived? Can you hack it? Can you handle it? And sometimes like you go through this phase of like, no's not enough of the things you want. And suddenly everyone's throwing everything at you. And then you're like, oh, how do I say no, even though this is all too much, right? So it's varied. It's like, there's so much celebration and love. And then there's also so much like to manage and process, especially when you don't have folks in your life necessarily who have gone through something similar, right? Like I don't have people in my family who I can turn to and be like, hey, what happened when your career took off in Hollywood? Like, I don't have that, I have to look towards my peers or some, makeshift mentors that I've met along the way. But it's a little bit of a solo kind of lonely journey sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's been great. I've been loving it. It's been amazing.
Let's talk about success, because you bring up a very good point. You've been doing the work, you've been writing for a long time, and at a very high level of writing. And it just so happened that this is the story, the journey, and very many people were, wanted to pay attention after the success of Hentified, because it's not every day like a story like that happens, right? That's the thing, is I think that we think a little bit backwards about success. At times, I think Hollywood defines success in a different way, in which especially women of color, in these positions like writers, or you're in the writing room, or directors or producers, you're supposed to be something else. I don't know. Am I off?
Am I supposed to be something else in a writer's room? And in what way? Like
I guess you're supposed to, I don't know, have a track record that maybe is different, or you walk into a successful situation and people think you've already had all this other work and projects under your belt, and not, and they kind of think it's like an overnight success. Whereas you had just talked about, like, I've been working on this for a really long time.
Yeah, no, I think for me, it's been a feeling of like folks thinking like, oh, you're brand new. And some of that is like, I have those sweet indigenous genes that make me look younger than I really am. And then there's the other part of it, which is, being a woman of color, like often you're infantilized, and you see you and they think, oh, you haven't been doing, like, what could you have possibly done by this point, right? And then when you actually start to list out all the things you've done, they're like, oh, wow, you are actually extremely qualified for this, or overqualified. But yeah, I think it tends to be this idea that you're an overnight success. And I don't think most people are. Like, I don't think anyone's an overnight success if you really look at it. Like, if you really look at their lives, like most people have been working at it for quite a while, even if they were really young. I feel like I've seen a lot of like young actors who've blown up who like have been doing it since they were 5, like you don't see the background. And I think like being able to see behind the scenes of what it takes to get to this place is so vital and important. And I try to talk about it a lot because I think, people need to know that that life is not perfect like that. Things don't just land in your lap like that. That like life is, the difficulties you're going through, all the people you look up to are also have gone through as well. And like, you are not alone in that, because so many of us are often alone in so many things, even though we all share the same experience. And it's important for us to talk about it. And especially women of color who have been historically told to stay silent and not share the experiences that we have that are so similar,
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of the issues you brought up in Hentified, such as immigration, gentrification, racism, queer issues, class issues. I mean, these are, I guess,
all the issues.
Yeah, you would. I don't know. I don't think that you walk into Hollywood and say, this is going to sell, that's going to be the next big thing. And people really want to listen to these things that real people go through, and they're really hard. They're hard to hear. But the way that you put, Hentified together, obviously, you're not ashamed. That was part of it, that you wanted people to get out of it. You were not writing this necessarily for, I don't know, the definition of success in Hollywood. You're writing this as a love letter to your community.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, the show was very much about, for me, it's the story I've been trying to tell my whole life, like wanting to inject these stories with the people in my life that I love. I often tell the story of like when I was younger, writing in coffee shops and where my family immigrated to East LA, but I mostly grew up in Norwalk, which is a little south of there. And I'd sit in coffee shops and I would look at the people going into that coffee shop because the area was so specific. So you'd have young Latino professionals coming in, young Latino educators, cholos, gangsters coming into the same Starbucks. Like you would have old, immigrant mamas with their like children, they're coming in, and like I would get so emotional just sitting there looking at them because I felt so much love for my community and their stories and their backgrounds, and how, even though it was a coffee shop, how they all ended up here together in their very backgrounds and stories. And I think sitting with my family, hearing my tias, my aunts tell stories, and my aunt's converted garage where my grandma lived when I was growing up. We'd go there every Sunday, and my tias all gathered around and told their stories, and they were hilarious. They were hysterical, and they were funny, and there was drama, and there was love, and there was dancing. And I never saw that on television, and I was dreaming of that. And so it was many years of me wanting to just put the things that I loved and the people that I love on the page. And I think that's just the artist calling. Like, I don't know why I have this deep urge inside of me to tell those stories, but there they are. And Pantsified for me was the place where I got to really just spill all of that love into it. And I think that's true for Marvin as well. We both were just ready to spill our love into these characters in this world. And it was so vital and important. So, ultimately when we walked into these rooms with the story, we were take it or leave it, but this is what it's going to be, because this is going to be the most authentic version of who we are. And we're not going to apologize for that. And I actually think it served us to come in unapologetically and authentically, because you can feel that raw realness. And I think executives, that's ultimately what they're looking for in a show. Whatever you're talking about in the show, class, race, whatever, cool. But if there's an authentic realness to the story you're telling, it's going to always, call to all kinds of people. It's going to be universal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to read what you wrote in response to the cancellation of Pantsified. Okay. And this touches on, the subject of success as well. You wrote, metrics and algorithms will never measure the true impact of what we did here. Don't let anyone tell you we didn't succeed. We blasted through a brick wall and made ourselves known. That looks like a whole lot of success to me.
Yeah, that was a moment for me. The cancellation of the show was it was when it was leaked to Deadline, it was not, it was a surprise to us because we had found out a month before. So we had some time to process. And when it got leaked, we thought we had more time to prepare for that announcement. And so we had no preparation. And the next day, that day when it got leaked, what I didn't expect was I had processed it. What I didn't expect was the intense response to the cancellation from the community, how much it felt like a death in the family. It felt different from other cancellations. And I don't know that I had expected that. And I think what I was feeling was a community that had so much invested in the show in terms of this, having a successful show that depicted people that they loved, that felt like home, and to have it taken away in such a way was just painful. It was painful for them for that to happen. But what I then felt was hey, it's not, I didn't want anyone to walk away feeling like something was taken from them. I wanted them to walk away knowing that something was given, that they got this beautiful gift, that we all got this beautiful gift, and we were all deserving of this beautiful gift. And that we did succeed because the impact of the show already did what it needed to do. The show did what it needed to do already. And that is beautiful. And we need to celebrate that and embrace it, because there's so many things in this system, in this world, that take from us, right? Constantly taking from us and making us feel like we're less than, or not enough, or not successful in some way. And I did not want to let this moment be one of those moments when we created this beautiful thing that is so deserving, that we all deserved, and that, that's for the signs, that we all deserved. And I wanted everyone to keep that front and center, versus this feeling of, we all have the right to mourn and process. But I did also want them to walk away feeling damn, look at what we got, this gorgeous story about us, and let's celebrate them, and let's remember this moment in time and use it as a catalyst for more. And then I wanted Netflix to know it too. I wanted everyone to know that though in your eyes you felt like it was time for us to go, I just want to remind you, this was successful. You may not know the breadth of the success because you cannot measure it in the way that you measure it, but know that I know, and that so many of us know, the breadth of the success of this show. And I think it's us taking back the control, the ownership of the narrative, of the show and what we did. And I think that's super important as people of color, as marginalized people, to constantly do. And that's why I wrote that statement, because for me, it was like Mama Bear came out and I was like, let me take care of my people, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I loved it. I loved it so much as a creative person myself, and queer, and a woman, and, you know, a child of refugees. It's like, I loved everything about it because I'd strive so hard to be successful in other people's eyes that every time I thought that it was failure, I, you know, put myself down. But when I read it, I was like, gosh, what a loss to Netflix, because there's so many movies or shows that they have on now that apparently, you know, it works for their algorithm or whatever, but I hate it. I wanted to get your thoughts on, you know, Netflix is obviously going through their thing now, and many people not really happy with their decision making. And so on that whole thing of algorithm, and how I think, you know, really doesn't give, I guess, equity for, you know, folks like yourselves, like myself. You know, I think that is part of the problem, why are these authentic stories might not get told.
Yeah, you know, I think it's a difficult thing. I can't like speak directly to like, you know, their actions or what they're doing. I have no idea. But what I do know is that historically, the way that we are perceived in the world is directly linked to the way that we're represented in media, and has been for over 100 years now, or 100 years now. And it's very fascinating that this institution that controls the way that we're represented, that then can often always impacts the way we're treated in the world through legislation, through unconscious bias, so many ways, right? This tool that's used to create that perception of us is tied up in this like institution that is tied into capitalism, right? So it's like about the money and the numbers at the end of the day. And it's a hard thing because there's this idea of diversifying, or healing whatever that misrepresentation was, and then thinking that you're going to do it in a couple of years when it's been 100 years of it, right? So like I think there's a lot of folks who've been making initiatives that maybe it's starting to kind of fall away. These initiatives around diversity and needing people to understand, like, that's not going to change in 2 years. Like, you can't erase the unconscious bias. It's going to happen automatically in algorithms. It's going to happen automatically through your media. Like, there's still a lot of work to get something like our show into the right homes. Like, it's not going to just happen automatically. And whether or not you're going to do the work, right? Are you going to do the work to stay with it? And listen, they have a lot of diverse people in other shows and other things. Like, there's nothing, and I celebrate that too. And I think it's beautiful. And I'm here for them and here for that, and those creators and those things. I just wonder about like certain types of stories and why those stories are maybe having a difficult time. How do you look at this as not only a business, but also this tool that historically determine the way people are treated? And how can you separate the two a little bit so that some of your work is actually purposeful in that way? And it's hard because it is a business, you know? So it's this thing that I've just been thinking about a lot, and that has been on my mind a lot in terms of how we, some of us creators who are trying to do some more deeper change work that hopefully will change a system. And it's just not going to happen overnight, right? And that's the conundrum that for me, is I'm trying to figure out with a place like Netflix, right? But I think we'll get there, and we'll keep having the conversations.
Well, we're very lucky that you're still in it. You're still, moving and shaking. You're still writing and telling Latinx stories.
Thank you.
We're getting some questions from our audience. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Keep them coming. And in a few minutes here, I'll open up to your questions. So, the focus has been taken off just a little bit on issues like immigration, which in season 1 and 2 very much, was a big topic that was covered and hentified. If we were to bring back the show, what do you think? Would we continue to talk about immigration? What other themes might you include? What were some, other?
Wow.
Yeah.
Big question. It's so interesting because when we first pitched the show, we had an idea of what 4 seasons would look like. And that's kind of what Marvin and I wanted to do. We wanted to do 4 seasons. And, this storyline was there. The one with Pop, we always knew we wanted to do. And then there was a storyline with Beatriz, Anna's mom, that I was always really excited to do that we didn't get to do. We did a kind of a capsule version of it in episode 8 of season 1, which was to see this immigrant mother go from being a garment factory worker to becoming an activist. And we wanted to show her journey of becoming like someone who leads a movement ultimately in a future season. So you see her stand up to her boss in that episode 8, but that little seed actually came from what we really wanted to do with her arc-wise in the future, which is like she was going to become as big of an activist as Anna, and she was going to end up leading all these garment workers and stuff. And a lot of that was inspired for me from some time I spent working on this documentary called Made in LA I was the assistant to the producers, and they dealt with garment factory workers in LA. And it was just this beautiful film that really actually showed these factory workers becoming like activists. And to me, like, you saw it everywhere in all the different movements, the gentrification movement. Like you saw the mujeres coming out and learning how to fight for their rights. And for me, that's so impactful and powerful because they're the women in my family. They're my mom, they're my aunts, they're my grandma. They're like the people that like I've always seen my whole life and I want to continue to see. And I would love to have seen that for Beatriz. And I think there was going to be more around gentrification for Anna and her role as an artist. And as she became an even bigger artist, having to deal with the same question of like the impact of her art, like is her art helping or is it hurting? But on a grander scale, we talked about a gallery, like a bigger situation with a gallery where she had her own show. Like we were going to see a lot of that type of stuff. But we also thought about going to Mexico was our big thing that you saw at the end. Chris like went to Mexico. I think one of our hopes was in the 3rd season that we would go to Mexico and shoot some stuff there. Cause we all just wanted to go eat some good food in Mexico. Yeah.
So I'm guessing you didn't go to Mexico since the show ended?
No. Oh, since the show ended, I have gone to Mexico. Actually, 2 times I've gone to Mexico since the show ended. So I had my good food. Don't worry.
Every time I eat a burrito, and especially here in San Francisco, I always think about my own impact. I'm like, should I? I love, I'm always thinking about that and the whole gentrification.
Oh gosh. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Right.
I'm always thinking about it also. I'm like, well, I can't do that because I did a show about that. Like there's always like the question around like, but that's the question. That's the question of the show.
Right.
Like, are we doing good? Are we doing bad? And it's very complicated.
We're going to come back to talking about, feeling complicated in a little bit. I'm going to go to our audience.
Very good at feeling complicated.
No, but I love that you bring it up and it's so honest because I think, again, we go back to beating ourselves up and sometimes maybe, being complicated is beautiful.
So beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're starting to get a few questions, so I want to make sure I get them in. What is left on your professional bucket list?
Ooh, I like that question. What is left on my professional? Well, directing a feature. So I directed an episode of the show last season, but my hope is to direct my own feature soon, and that's in the works. Trying to work on that in different ways, and it's a little bit of a final frontier, I think. I also did a cameo this season. I had so much fun and I want to do more cameos. So I don't want to do like full blown acting, but I'm like, I liked being on set. It was fun. It's fun to have that little appearance. And I think that would be really cool. And I think the last thing would be just like being able to uplift other creators and writers. Like I really look up to people like Mindy Kaling and Issa Rae and Lena Waithe. And I really want to hopefully create I'm not a big fan of the term empire, but like a mini kind of like empire of like, that has the capacity and the power to fuel other creators and writers from particular backgrounds. Because I think that's the other thing about me is that I'm very specific about the stories that I tell. And a lot of times it involves class. Like I come from a working class community, and I think the way, our communities are complex and diverse, right? And some of us within our own communities are much more impacted more drastically by the system than other people in our community. So, myself, for example, being light-skinned Latina, I have privilege because of that. growing up poor, that was something that was, someone who grew up with money is not going to know what that impact is. And I think for me, being able to invest in creators who are creators of color, who are much more disenfranchised in those ways, or came from working class communities, or are trying to highlight Black or Indigenous bodies, like those folks, being able to lift those voices and those particular stories is very important to me. And women, like women and femmes and like queer stories, like I want to be able to lift up those stories, and that would be the big next thing for me.
So if you're listening and you've got an idea, I would recommend tweeting Linda or getting
not yet, not quite yet. I'm still working towards that. I'll let y'all know when I'm ready for the tweets.
Okay, well, we'll follow you. We'll wait for the bat message or the cat message.
Yeah.
Okay. What has changed in writers' rooms, pitch meetings, in TV and film in the last 5 years? What do you hope will change in the next 5 years?
What has changed? Well, I guess it has been that long for me. I was like, I haven't been in rooms that long, but I think some of the things that have changed that maybe are not for the better, sadly, are we're seeing many more mini rooms being greenlit, which is like these short order, like writers' rooms that are there to, develop the first few episodes of a show and bring your writers in to brainstorm all that. And then often like whether or not the show gets greenlit is still up in the air, which then makes it difficult for writers to find work. And those same situations lead to productions that often don't have writers on sets for production because it saves, quote unquote, saves money, but does not save the sanity of your showrunners because they need those writer producers on set. And I think these are all things that hopefully in the next 5 years, it's all been affected because of these streaming giants that have come in. And that is something I believe the WGA is going to be working towards renegotiating in the next negotiation. And I hope that will then allow writers to have much more stable, work. And then on top of that, I think the rooms are starting to get more diverse, which is awesome because you're getting more and more people in positions of power like myself who can make those decisions and really help uplift and create more opportunities, because the advocacy to give people opportunities is equally important as like you putting the opportunities out there. Like sometimes you can say like, yes, we want diverse directors. And then you bring a list and then they're like, okay, but not those because they don't have enough credits. And then you have to go, yeah, but a lot of people don't have enough credits because historically we've been excluded from this whole industry. So then you have to have someone like me really fight for and advocate for that person, which is why you need people like me behind the camera positions of power. So I think hopefully that is also changing. I see that shift kind of happening as I see more and more people getting the show. So that's the pros and cons of streamers, right? At the one side, there's like some stuff that's not awesome. And on the other side, it made it so that there's a lot more opportunity for some people who look like us to come up, right? So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's what came to mind.
Yeah, no. I also, it's so validated because I do hear, yeah, Michelle, like we're getting more of our, diverse writers in the room, and it's nice and refreshing to hear somebody give honest feedback of how it's impacting the industry. There's a question here that I think is a good follow-up or segue. What do you think the future of film, TV media will be like? Are streaming services, social media providing new platforms for artists?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly what I'm saying. Like, I do think that they are providing more platforms and more opportunity for sure. I think it's a constantly changing thing because I think these streamers are also trying to figure out like what sells, what doesn't. Like that's going back to what I was talking about earlier. That's kind of the catch-22 of these things where it's like the opportunity is tied into this thing that is like, a capitalist system of like, okay, we got to make money. So even though we need these stories, if they're not able to deliver, then like, we may have to cut them all. And then what happens then is the bigger thing that happens is like then the assumption that those stories are not lucrative then makes it difficult for more things to get made in that same vein, even though it could have been just like, well, that particular story just didn't catch on. The way that you, like the breadth of white shows, you have shows that will not hit. And then you have shows that do. And like, but we're not there yet. We're not given that same opportunity of like, this one show failed, this show failed, like, and then it's like, okay, all the shows that are like that, we're just not going to do anymore. And usually it's because it's all the Latino shows. No, and it gets more and more difficult to do that. It's a little bit different. And I think that is really difficult. But I do think it's also made it so that there are a lot of opportunities for folks like us.
Thank you. Can you talk about the role of mentoring in your field of creativity? What makes a good mentor? How do you mentor others in your field?
Yeah. I think a good mentor listens and support. It's sort of like therapy where like you don't want to give your like too much of your own opinion because like a person's got to learn on their own, but you also kind of have to guide them towards like the right direction. So, like want to help them get to the answer on their own by supporting them. And I think a great mentor like really like brings out of them the thing that they really want, I always try to get them to a place of authenticity with themselves, because often like they're coming in with a lot of insecurities, a lot of fears, a lot of like ideas of what they're supposed to be and do that come from this industry and society. And so for me, I feel like it's my job to sit with them and say like, no, but who are you? And what is the story that you want to tell that's very specific to you? And what is the dream that you have that's really your dream? It's not the dream that you've seen other people talking about or you've seen in the media, like this big successful so-and-so. It's like, do you really want that or do you really want this? And like helping them to kind of get to that place. And I think a great mentor also knows how to choose mentees. I don't know if that's like the right way to put it, but like I'm always investing in people who I see are going to do the work. Like I can tell when someone's ready for me, when they're ready to like take the advice that I'm giving them. Because I think there's a difference, and I say this with so much love. Like there's some folks who actually can want the dream, but there's so much internal work that still has to happen before they can really fully like take it away sometimes. And sometimes for me, those folks is like, I don't think you need. No, not that you don't need a mentor, but like you may also need to go to therapy and like work on like what are the things that are blocking you, or simultaneously having that conversation. But I'm always looking for a mentee who's like going to show up and going to show up with like, hey, I'd love 30 minutes of your time, and these are the 3 things we're going to talk about, because I'm busy. A lot of folks are like super busy, right? Who are in these positions of power, and so I'd love a mentee who's like able to show up to the table with what they need from me, because then I know that my investment, the time that I'm putting in, is going to go a long way for them. I know that it's going to help them really rise. And the folks that have invested in that way, I've seen it. I've seen them rise because they are ready to really own that mentor and mentee relationship and be a part of it. And I think I say that that's an important part of mentorship, because that's how you get a good relationship and you get results out of the relationship. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's so great. There's a question here about, what advice you would give to young people to inspire them to persevere in their journey. I would imagine that that's another extension of what you just said, but particularly young people, I kind of feel like we opened up the show, like it is really, truly a tough time.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say, and this is a journey that I'm on, have been on, and will continue to be on for the rest of my life, is to ask yourself, how are you nurturing yourself with joy and love and play? Creativity is really an extension of playtime when we were kids, right? When we would dress up in costumes and we would have, play with our toys and make up stories and have fantasy time and like read books. And that's an extension of play. Like what we create, our movies, like that's just us being kids. Like that's us having fun, right? And I think what happens along the way, often we lose that part of ourselves and we see the work just as work, and like there's pressure and there's deadlines, and am I good enough? Is the story good enough? And what's the point of any of this? And what I love about thinking of it as childlike play is that none of that matters. Like when you're just playing, when you're just like, I'm just telling a story and I'm going to have the most fun I can at telling that story. And guess what? I'm not going to do it perfectly, and I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to keep getting better. But my job right now in this moment is to have fun and play and tell a fun story. And I really that's something that really came to me more deeply in the last like 3.5 years, because that's when my niece came into my life. My sister had a baby, and she's like the first grandchild in the family, in our immediate family. And watching the way that she plays, it was just like, oh yeah, that was me too. And like, that's why I do what I do. That's why I write. That's why I direct. That's why I put on whole productions. Because when you really think about it, you're like, what are we doing other than just make believe, right? And having fun. And I think that like remembering that always from like will allow you to tell great stories, because you're going to release the pressure. And there's a lot like physically in the body when you're holding a lot of stress and grief and anxiety. It's actually makes it hard to create. Like there's actual science behind it. Like you can't really create from a place of stress and anxiety. So if you're able to release that, whether it's through this idea of meditation, therapy, whatever it is that you need, running, it'll bring you back. Dancing, dance it out. It'll bring you back to the work in a way that's much more authentic and playful and fun, because you're a human being who deserves to have joy, and your work should be joyful. So that's what I would say.
I love that.
Yeah.
What is the best piece of professional advice that you received, and who was it from?
Ooh, the best piece of professional advice. Oh, wow. Oh, dang. I got stumped. I'm normally not stumped. I'm trying to remember a good one.
While you think of that, I'll share one in college.
Yeah.
It was college from a professor, and I was going to try to go into writing something for TV but she said, my best piece of advice to you is let it suck, because your first draft sucks anyway.
Yes, it does suck. Not yours, everybody's. Oh my goodness, I don't know why I can't think of one that someone has told me. I know there's been a billion things that I've been told, but I'll just share some advice that I like. I'm sure I learned it from someone. Remembering, like I'm a very spiritual person, so I often think of my work as like this thing that I'm channeling into the world. And when I think about it that way, I think about how like I am the vessel channeling that, and how that vessel needs to be taken care of. And that if you're not taking care of the vessel, how can you birth this story into the world, right? We support mamas when they're like bringing life into the world. We like, they have the postpartum time to care for themselves. And I feel like as creators, as artists, like we often don't give ourselves that. We just keep, hitting ourselves hard and keep going. But to see yourself as this like kind of magical being that's bringing magical stories into the world, and then remembering that magical being needs to be taken care of and loved and given massages and like all the things that you need to bring these stories into the world, because you're magical. There's a special thing that you're doing, and it's important to know that and to take care of it.
Thank you. Is there a TV show or film that changed or had a significant impact on your life?
I don't know if I would say these shows were like changed my life, but I will say that they're like shows that I greatly admire and strive towards. And those are Fleabag by Phoebe Waller-Bridge and I May Destroy You by Michaela Cole. Those two shows have been like on my mind for years, since I think it's only been a couple of years for one of them, and maybe like 4 or 5 years for the other one. But I just feel like they're just so the tone, the vibe, the balance of comedy and drama from me are in the story of a very complex women, both of them, each of them, and have complicated, deeper layers to them. For me, is just like the special sauce for me of like the sweet spot of where I love to live in my work, and I strive towards trying to get to that place in the projects that I'm working on now. But yeah, I would say those are the ones on top of my list right now. And then I would say the fun one, that's a silly story I like to tell, but not actually that silly, is that I grew up loving Star Trek. And I remember thinking like, oh, like I want to be an astronaut, I want to go to space. And then at some point I realized, oh no, I just love all these characters and I want to pretend like I'm in space and I want to make up stories and worlds. And I remember that being a thing that helped me realize that like, oh, I want to tell great stories. Like I want to tell fantasy and fairy tales,
I love that. Many artists talk about how creativity sometimes comes by surprise. Is there an experience that has happened to you that you can share?
Creativity that's come by surprise. Oh, it's a deep question. What I'll say is a reminder of like needing to feed my creativity with other creative arts. And I recently went to New York in April, the beginning of April. And right before that, I was kind of struggling with creativity because, I'd been working really hard through the pandemic, making a show, writing other, movies, and had just gotten my overall, was working on that. And I was like really like burned out essentially, and just kind of, working on trying to get back the juice. And I went actually to New York to work on a project with another artist there. And while I was there, one, it was just beautiful to be in this great, magnificent city that's always been like a dream place for me. I've been there before, but for some reason this time around, it felt cool because I was working with someone who I really admire. And in the evenings, I went to watch some musicals. And when I watched the musicals, I was reminded, I was like, oh yeah, sometimes you got to walk away from your work and walk into someone else's work and sit with it and let it inspire you and let it pour into you. And I didn't realize how much I needed that, and how much it sparked in me, like the excitement to get back to my own projects and my own work, and like inspired, like, triggered other ideas. And the last musical I saw was Wicked, and I had never seen it before. I had been wanting to see it forever. And I was there by myself that last night because some friends had visited, and then I was alone. And so I bought myself a ticket. I sat like the best seat. It was like the center. I bought myself the best seat at the center because I'd never been able to do that. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And I just sat there, and the minute the curtains flew open, the opening number happened, I was just like a 5-year-old with like my little drink and just like smiling big. And I was like, oh yes, this is what I want. This is like the stuff. This is the reason I do what I do. And it allowed me to come back and create and write from a place that was filled with that creative like flow. And so I guess in some ways that was a surprising week for me. I didn't realize I needed that. I needed that to do what I do,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Somebody had said to me this week, find your people, find your tribe, find the people that will listen to you, believe you, and want to push you to, go for the stars. And it seemed like, you found that in a way in your industry between, again, America Ferrera, Eva Longoria, and all these amazing folks. How do you do that? How do you find your people? Or do they find you, or how does that work?
Dang, yeah. How do you find your people? I think you just show up every day to the work. Like, because honestly, like, the America thing came through me working with Marvin on our digital series, and she read those scripts and because of a general meeting, and she fell in love with the work. She fell in love with seeing something on the pitch that felt like home to her. It felt like her. And so then, she came on board to that. And in the process of working together, we became friends. And I didn't expect for her to end up being the director on the film that had adapted. But after working with her, and like she had directed episodes of our first season, I thought she was incredible. Macro, wanted to reach out. I was like, oh my God, I would love for her to be considered. And it just ended up that way. And she and I worked on that project together. And that, was a very amazing experience I hope to talk about someday. But she and I really went deep into the material together. And that led to this, a connection that was very special and important. And I think, with Eva, she found me. She was like, they had a project to me and Marvin that was another project she was doing. And she actually was like, I want Linda for Flaming Hot. And she was trying to get my Mexican daughter's script to read so that she can like get me into it. And they reached out to me actually just like a few weeks before I was going to go into surgery. We were in post on season 1. And I was like, well, I can't do this. Like, I am going to surgery. And they're like, well, we'll wait till she's, ready to come and talk to us. And it worked itself out. But I think beyond just like finding your tribe or your people, like that's going to happen, I think, organically as you show up to events. And if you're looking at a particular type of community, like for me, I was looking for Latina people who were going to be in the arts, right? And I just went to community events. I followed people in the community online. I supported them and uplifted their work, and they did the same for me. And in the process of uplifting each other, we became friends. Like the gold standard for us was, or the key was us just always uplifting each other and supporting each other's work. And that organically created community and created, ways that we ended up working together. Then you start to work together because you're like, I love that person. Like maybe we could do a thing today together. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of ways, but I think showing up is first and foremost to the community, because I think there's a lot of people who will ask that question. They're like, how come how come they didn't invite me to this? How come, XYZ? And it's like, well, most of us were not invited. We just showed up. We said, hey guys, hi, I'm here. I'm gonna leave a comment. How you doing? Oh, when's the thing? Can I come? Like showing up is half the battle. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. How about Latinx Pride and Joy? We had that in Headified, and then I'm sure many more other shows or other ways, but share with us in what ways we can continue showing up for Latinx Pride and Joy.
I mean, I think, well, you could go to Latinx Pride probably this month, but there's that. I think supporting the shows and the films that celebrate it, like when you see something coming out that's like the community is uplifting and saying, please go watch, please go watch it. Like, I think there's a lot of folks who sometimes equate Latina content with like foreignness, like, oh, that's not for me, that's like foreign, right? And I think we're still sadly dealing with the repercussions of xenophobia, and probably will for a long time. But the reality is most of us have been here forever, and our stories are American stories. So like, as much as you want to watch that like American TV show that historically you've been told is what's American, a show like Headified, a show like Gordita Chronicles, which is coming out soon. Rutherford Falls just dropped today, which is a Native show, but it's created by Native Mexican creator Sierra Ornelas Teller. Like, go support it and watch it on Peacock. Like, those are things that like are people and shows that and movies that are really trying to show us in our joy, in our pride, right? So if you support those things, there will be more. And then we can see ourselves in them, and we can start to other people can see us in ways that are new and different, not just sad and morose and broken, but they get to see us be full humans. And then that starts to change the narrative, right? Not only in media, but in the world.
Thank you. So, how we were talking about being complicated or having complicated conversations can be beautiful. Let's go back to that, and a subject like gentrification, because it's happening, and it's happening more and more in communities, BIPOC communities. I mean, today in San Francisco, the front page of the Chronicle, or our local newspaper, they talked about what the tech industry did to San Francisco, and now a lot of them are moving out, and we're left with a lot of trauma, poverty, oppression. So maybe, let's talk about, yes, it's complicated when we talk about issues like gentrification, but there are ways in which we could rise up and do something about it.
Yeah. It's so funny because, I know I did a show about it, obviously. So you would assume like she's an expert in it, right? But I never see myself in that way, because I feel like my role in the process is always to turn to the community and the activists in that community. And what is it that they're calling you to do? Because I'm an artist who can translate the experience and put it on the page and ask the big questions, right? Here are the questions we're asking. These are the things that are happening. Like, they're not Black, they're not white, they're complex and they're difficult. And sometimes they're beautiful and sometimes they're painful and sometimes we're thriving and sometimes we're not. I can ask those questions, but in terms of like creating change, my first thing and what I learned in my work, just, my very early roots in college were around activism. And what I've always learned over time is that you turn to the leaders who are doing the actual work and who are doing that work day in and day out, right? Like I show up to the work in my art, but I'm not on the ground doing the organizing. So I always tell people, turn to the organizers in your community. What are they saying to do? Because they're the ones who've been in the trenches doing the work for many years, and they will know exactly what you need to do. They'll have a whole list for you to do. They'll be like, come on down to the meeting. Here are all the things we need you to do to support this movement. And I think that's always a place I tell people to start to help, like, because anything can heal. Nature heals, right? Even a community that's been disrupted and traumatized will find a way back to itself if people come together to heal it together, right? And doesn't come without challenges and obstacles, but it is possible. And for me, it's always turning to the people who've been doing the work and supporting them, whether it's like, donating to them or what have you. But that's the first step, I think.
I found the answer in Hintified, just the way that you depicted so many different people coming together. And even if they had different ideas or different views, in the end, what worked was listening to each other or caring about one another. That's what I loved. Yeah. That's what I think. And I asked you that because I saw that in Hintified. And so again, thank you for that. And thank you for continuing to tell stories and for writing. We got a couple more questions from our audience here. Has there ever been a time that you've had to walk away from a project? Difference in direction of the story, difference in opinion by the director, the studio management, and how were you able to come to that decision?
Yeah, I haven't actually, not any project where I've been that deep into it. I'm sure that it'll probably happen at some point. I'm prepared for that possibility. But it hasn't happened for me so far. And I think what I've learned, and it's not to say that I haven't been in a position where I've been like, oh my gosh, should I walk away? That has also happened, but I worked through it. But I think what I've learned from that is like picking projects that fulfill me, make me happy, have good collaborators who I trust, producers who are positive. Like I'm always looking for the good people in this industry because this industry is, there's toxic people everywhere, right? But in this industry especially. So I'm always looking for like, are you sharing the same values as me? So that when we go to work together, it's going to be a harmonious, beautiful experience versus like a toxic, painful one. Because I'm at a point in my life where I no longer want to put myself through pain. Like I am not here for pain, I'm here for joy. I'm here to nourish myself and take care of myself and live a full, happy life. And so the choices I make, even with the projects and the people I work with, all come from that place of like, okay, am I going to have a good experience? And you can't always 100% predict it, but that's why doing the internal work on yourself helps you to refine your own inner compass. And like that compass starts to get more and more honed in. And then it gets easier and easier to be like, wait a second, that little red flag there, we're not going to do it. This is not going to work. I already know. So I would say like, in those situations, there's that, but I have also learned that like being able to have the freedom to walk away, to know that I can, is one of the reasons why it's made it easier to choose certain projects and say, I'm going to move forward with this. I feel good. I'm not 100% sure, but there's something tells me I got to do it. But I know I have the freedom to walk away and it's scary and painful, I'm sure, to do it. And I've done it in other scenarios, not projects, but I never regret doing it because it's always the best decision in the long run. So that's what I'll say about that.
What about handling critics? Especially critics who say things like, oh, no, let's not include the Black trans Latinx character. It's too much or something like that.
Oh, wow. Was that a criticism?
Well, okay, never mind.
No,
I could see you like writing more around, including these types of characters.
I was like,
but
someone not want that kid. I love her. I obviously get critiqued, or we got critiqued, obviously, with all the different trades and all that good stuff. I mean, we were blessed that we had a lot of great critical review. But there was the review here and there that was like, wait, I remember there was like one, I forget which outlet it was. It was one of the big ones. I won't say specifically because I don't want to call. It might have been Hollywood Reporter. I forget. But there was someone who just really did not like it. And they were like a well-respected, they were like first-gen immigrant themselves. And I was like, how interesting, like that they were like intensely critical of it in a way that nobody else was being. And I don't know if it's a thick skin thing or what, or I've just lived in the digital world for a long time. So I had a digital company before, I got into television, and you learned very early on that, the internet, the world comes with the people who are going to like tear you down and the people who are going to lift you up. And that's the thing that you got to do, is just focus on the people who are going to lift you up, because at the end of the day, you are not going to be for everybody. You are not going to fulfill everyone. It's impossible. Like we all are I hate things and I'm like, oh, that was trash. Like I do it privately. I don't say it publicly because I respect artists, but and it's not because it's just, it wasn't for me. It wasn't created for me, and that's important. But I think if you're saying specifically stories that are about us, like I think it's the same thing. Like if you don't want it, it's because there's some sort of internal bias that's keeping you from wanting it. And that's your problem. That's for you to figure out and work on. But I'm going to go do my thing, and I'm going to do my thing for the people who do need it, who do want to see it, who are being seen by it, or who are learning from it. Like there's, for every person who has that criticism, there's usually 100 more that are actually very positive. They're just not as vocal. Because they don't need to be. They don't need the attention in the same way, right? So that's how I see it, and I just try to work from that place. Of course, those things hurt every now and then, but as much as you can ignore it and just move forward, it's better.
I'm going to make a T-shirt tonight and wear it tomorrow, and it's going to say, "It's your problem."
Yes, make it. Do it.
We have time for one more question, and so I'm going to kind of add my last question with this audience question, and it was kind of the same vein anyway. But yeah, what would you like to see more of to inspire students, especially in arts education, or even, young girls who want to write, who want to dream, who want to make TV shows and films like you?
Like what type of programming I would want for them, or?
Maybe not necessarily programs, but any of the students in arts education and writing, and, kind of what could inspire them to keep going. If you can give us some advice, give us some words of wisdom, keep them motivated to stay in the arts.
Honestly, someone, I'm forgetting the woman's name who introduced us, Lata, I believe it was. Her last name, she said it, which is the beautiful thing that's happening right now, which you all brought me here to speak, and having people who look like you doing the thing that you want to do, or doing the thing that you didn't even know existed, and realize, oh, that's something I want to do, is life-changing. And actually one of the reasons why I do these speaking events and I put myself out there, I'll never forget early on in Hentified, we had these opportunities, and I kind of was shying away from them because it's nerve-wracking to be public. It's very nerve-wracking. And I remember Marvin actually telling me, there's so many girls brown girls who need to see you, who need to see that you are out there, that you exist, that you are running a show, that you're creating shows, that you're writing things. And I think shortly after that, we had done a panel somewhere, and literally young girls came up to me, and I stopped that reflection, and then they were like, I can't believe that you exist. I get that constantly. People come up to me and go I can't believe you exist. You look like me. You speak like me. You have the same upbringing as me. That isn't real. It doesn't happen ever. And it's made me realize how critical it is that I put myself out there over and over again, that I show up over and over again, that I speak, and that I speak from the most authentic place possible, so that people who are exactly like me or close in proximity to who I am can see themselves. And I think the more that you can bring those examples to these young girls, the more they're going to feel the inspiration to know that they can do it. Because that's really all we ever need, is the example of oh, okay, someone is out there doing it, and then I can do it. And I think that is incredible. And I applaud all of you all for doing it, we're doing it, and I can continue to do it.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you for all that you continue to do, and that you create. And again, thank you for Hentified.
Oh, thank you. Such a pleasure speaking with you. This is wonderful.
Well, this concludes our program. Thank you to all of you who joined us this evening for this special conversation. Our thanks to Linda Yvette Chavez, co-creator, co-showrunner, and executive producer of Netflix's Hentified. The Applied Materials Foundation, thanks so much for supporting this program. And again, thanks to all of you. For more programming, you can head to commonwealthclub.org. We'll see you next time.